Hi, everyone. My name is Ruthie Firnbach, and I am a first grade teacher at Woodview Elementary School in Grayslake, Illinois, and I'm so excited to read this book to you today. This book is called I Am Neil Armstrong, and I bet if you are familiar with Neil Armstrong and Purdue, you might already know a little bit about his life, but it's super exciting, and I wanted to share a little bit more with you. So we are going to get started. Okay, so here's the first page. I am Neil Armstrong, and look where he is. I bet you can guess what his job was. I grew up on a farm with no electricity. When I was 8 years old, my goal was to climb this silver maple tree, the biggest one in my backyard. It seemed impossible. The tree was so big, and I was so small. How would I do it? I needed to be brave. I wasn't a brave kid, though. Back in Ohio, when I was 3 years old, I got scared when we went to see Santa Claus, and they said, "Say cheese," and he's so scared. I'd also need to be smart. As a kid, I loved to read. In first grade, I read more than 100 books. Really? Yep, more than 100 in a year. Finally, I would need to be patient. During Monopoly games, when my brother would get upset and kick the table, I always stayed calm. Yet, to climb that huge tree, the only way to the top was this. I had to take that first step. And he says, up we go. Climbing the tree was like a puzzle. I needed to pick the right branches in the right order. I had to engineer or figure out a solution. Plus, I loved the feeling of being up high. But then I grabbed a dead branch and crack. I fell 15 feet and I landed on my back. Luckily, I wasn't hurt. On that day, I did learn not to grab dead tree branches. But the most important thing I did, and he says, "Should I get Mama?" And he says, "Yeah," was to get back up again. Success never comes easily. It takes hard work. And when it came to hard work, I was really good at that. At 10 years old, I mowed grass at a cemetery for only 10 cents an hour. These jobs helped pay for the one thing that I loved more than anything else. And it says, then I worked at a bakery. I was so small I could fit into the mixing vats to clean them. Airplanes. My mom bought me my first toy airplane when I was 2 or 3 years old. After that, I was always zooming around the house and through the neighborhood. That kid really likes planes, doesn't he? Vroom. When I was 6, I took my first real airplane ride in an aluminum high-wing monoplane called the Tin Goose. The 12 seats inside were all wicker chairs. It rattled like crazy. And it says, "This is not a good idea." And it says, my dad was scared. I enjoyed it. So his dad is very scared. It's not like a plane that we're used to riding on. It looks very, very different than the planes that we are used to riding on. I became obsessed with learning about planes, reading about them, and even building them. As a kid, I built so many model airplanes, they covered my entire bedroom and part of the basement. So look, he has them hanging from the ceiling and all over. By the time I was 15, instead of buying toy airplanes, I started saving my money for flying lessons. I worked 3 jobs making 40 cents an hour. It took me over 22 hours to pay for one single airplane lesson. Let's go another flight. You really like airplanes, don't you? What gave you that idea? So his instructor is saying, wow, you're really into airplanes, huh? And he worked very hard to be able to do that. By 16, I got my real pilot's license even before I had a driver's license, so he could fly a plane before he could even drive a car. As a teenager, I loved flying so much, I'd have the same dream over and over. In the dream, by holding my breath, I could hover over the ground. I didn't fly or really move, I would just float there. When I got older, I joined the Navy, flying in 78 missions during the Korean War. On one of them, my plane lost its wing, so I needed to eject and get out immediately. I'd never taken ejection training, so even though my plane was about to crash, I had to stay calm and read the directions written on the seat. Let's see, how do I open this parachute? And then he did, he parachuted out. I landed safely in the water. By the end of the war, the U.S. gave me many war medals, though I never bragged about them. I had been taught to stay humble. In college, I studied how to be an engineer, which is a person who designs and builds machines and structures. That love of engineering led me to become a test pilot. And if you didn't know this, Neil Armstrong went to Purdue, and there's actually a huge statue of him and actually a building, an engineering building named after him. So this is a super exciting time in his life, right? At Edwards Air Force Base, we'd test the newest planes, like this X-15 rocket plane, which went up to 4,520 miles per hour, otherwise known as Mach 6. That's still the fastest anyone has ever moved in a manned-powered aircraft. Engineers tested and learned. By flying that rocket, we learned new things about aerodynamics, how air affects a plane, hypersonic speed, and the best materials to use on airplanes, making things better. That's engineering. In 1957, the space race had begun. Both America and the Soviet Union were competing to be the first into outer space. The Soviets sent their first satellite into space. It was named Sputnik, and that's it right there. Then they sent the first living creatures that survived space travel. 2 dogs named Strelka and Belka. Woof! And it says, translation of their woof, it says, we got back safely. The Soviet Union also sent the first human, Yuri Gagarin, into space, though we sent a person named Alan Shepard soon after. America wanted to catch up, so President John F. Kennedy issued a challenge that year. I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon. A man on the moon? Can you imagine? So back then, no one had ever been there before. And so when he said that, everyone was like, is that possible? Oh my goodness. Not even the Soviets had traveled that far. So how would we manage to climb that high? The only thing we knew for sure was this: we would have to engineer a solution. We needed new ideas and new equipment. And to fly all the way to the moon, we needed a new type of pilot, an astronaut. From all across the country, people, including me, applied to be astronauts for NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. To check if we could handle space, NASA put us through lots of wild tests. Here, they shot ice water into my ear to see how I would react to the cold. In another test, they put me in a black room, no lights, no clocks, and they told me to come out after 2 hours. They were testing to see if I could judge the time without tools. I sang this song over and over, 15 men in a boarding house bed, roll over, roll over. Since I knew how long the song was, I used it to mark time. They even put me in a really hot room where it got up to 145 degrees Fahrenheit. To keep my body heat normal, I did nothing but sit still. I tried not even to think. And of course, they spun me around and around and around. This is centrifuge training. It lets you feel the speed of re-entering Earth's atmosphere. As you approach 15 Gs, meaning the force of your speed pushes against you within 15 times of your own weight, your eyeballs flatten and you can't see. He's passing every test, they're saying. To get to the moon, NASA had a step-by-step plan. The Mercury missions would take Americans into space, and the Gemini missions would take us into orbit around the Earth. With each step, we would get a little farther and go up a little higher. So they couldn't just go straight to the moon. They had to do all of these other missions first and get a little bit at a time and achieve a little bit at a time to see if it was working correctly. In March of 1966, I was ready for my first space flight on the Gemini. My goal was to fly alongside and dock with another spacecraft so that we were both linked together. Look at the Earth from up here. I wonder if I can see my house in Houston. It was the first time two spacecraft ever connected in space. So that's a part of one spacecraft and that's a part of another one, and they're connecting. Everyone started celebrating the moment we were docked. And then suddenly we were undocked again and we were spinning out of control. Something's wrong. What's happening, Gemini? Are you okay? We're tumbling end over end. So there's a short circuit in one of our thrusters. If we can't stop spinning, the force will tear the ship apart. And that's Dave Scott, who was with him. After all those years as a test pilot, I knew to stay calm. I kept my eyes on the controls so I could fire another thruster to stop our spinning. The mission had to be stopped earlier than planned. We landed safely, but it taught me another lesson. Nothing in space is easy. Over and over, there were setbacks and devastating crashes. During a practice session on the launch pad, astronauts Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee were killed when a frayed wire caused an accidental fire. Over in the Soviet Union, cosmonauts, the Russian term for astronauts, died too. At times, going to the moon seemed impossible, and this is the Space Mirror Memorial. But we never let it stop us. With each setback, we learned how to strengthen the Apollo spacecraft, which would take us to the moon. Apollo 8 just made the first orbit of the moon, so that's Apollo 8. Whenever I talked about flying an aircraft or a spacecraft, I used the term we. That's because every accomplishment any of us ever achieved required the help of so many others, from scientists and engineers and welders and mathematicians to tailors who sewed our spacesuits, to all the astronauts from the previous missions. And he's saying, Catherine, would you check these numbers for me? So that's astronaut John Glenn, and that's mathematician Katherine Johnson. So look at how many people it takes to help build these things and to help test them. It's not like there's one person who's doing it all. There are many, many, many people who are involved in this. When Apollo 11 was finally ready, I said to the flight director, please tell everyone who worked on this that this is their launch too. Tell them they'll be riding along with us the whole way. All that was left now was to proceed with the steps in the plan. Step 1. The giant Saturn V rocket had 3 stages. When each stage burned its fuel, the next stage would take over, giving us enough lift to get us out of Earth's gravity and into the moon's orbit. It says, we were up here in the command module, which was called the Columbia. So this is the command and service module. This is the lunar module. This is the stage 3, stage 2, and stage 1. So there's a bunch of parts to this that they have to figure out. Step 2. When we reached the moon, the command module would park, circling the moon, and stay in orbit. We would move the lunar module, and then we would move to the lunar module, and then the lunar module would go down to the surface. So the lunar module is going down. Step 3, when we were ready to leave, the lunar module would lift off from the moon. It would have to perfectly dock with the command module. Step 4, then we would climb back into the command module, fire the rocket on the service module, and come back to Earth. One key question remained. Would it work? On July 16, 1969, at Florida's Cape Kennedy, almost 1 million people were there to watch. There were 3 of us on board. Buzz Aldrin was the lunar module pilot, Michael Collins was the command module pilot, and Neil Armstrong was the commander. On Launch Pad 39A, after a 417-step checklist to make sure everything was perfect, the countdown began. 12, 11, 10, 9, ignition sequence start, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engines running, liftoff. We have a liftoff. We were going over 24,200 miles per hour as the third stage rocket pushed us free of Earth's gravity. Step 1, Saturn separates successfully, check. So, how was the view? Look at that sunrise. Get a picture of that. Since there's no gravity in space, everything floated, including our food. So we'd eat our meals out of small bags. My favorite was spaghetti with meat sauce. For water, we would drink from a 6-foot tube. And to sleep, we could either stay wrapped up in a bag-like hammock or float with a lap belt. 3 days later, our destination was right in front of us. It's spectacular. Hello, moon. Remember our plan? We were still following it step by step. Buzz and I got into the Eagle. Step 2, lunar module, Eagle heads to surface. Check. Your go for powered descent. Landing was hard. Back then, our radar and instruments weren't very accurate. We couldn't even tell how high we were. I had to use a stopwatch and quick math to figure it out. We realized we weren't close to our landing spot. The ground wasn't smooth. There were rocks as big as cars. But I never panicked, even when we had less than a minute of fuel left. I trained my whole life for this moment. Okay, looks like a good area here. The landing was so soft, we barely felt it. Houston, Tranquility Base here, the Eagle has landed. Okay, now let's get on with it. Now came the hardest part of all. So everyone's cheering that they landed on the moon because it's a really big deal. That was the first time that anyone had ever done that before. This is the moon. For nearly a decade, my goal was to reach it. It seemed impossible. The moon was so far, and we were so small. So how did we do it? We had to be brave. We had to be smart. We had to be patient. But to really make it happen, I had to take that first step. It was 10:56 p.m., Sunday, July 20th, 1969. 1/5 of the world's population was watching on TV, so a lot of people in the whole world were watching. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind, he's saying as he takes his first steps. In my life, people called me a test pilot, an astronaut, and a space traveler. But to reach the stars, I needed to be an engineer. Engineers search for solutions. They solve problems. How? By testing and failing, testing and failing. And there he is playing with his plane when he was little. It is the key to science and also the key to life. It was never just one small step that got me there. It was the thousands that came before it. We all have moments when we fail, but failure is not an ending. It's an opportunity to learn something new. Whenever you tumble, you must get back up. Every mistake you make teaches you a better way forward. Here at the National Air and Space Museum, you can see the real command module and loads of other things, including rocks that they brought back from the moon. Did you know that there were 3 items were officially left on the moon? Number 1, a plaque that says, "We came in peace for all mankind." Number 2, a small disc imprinted with goodwill messages from world leaders. And number 3, an American flag. The night of the moon landing, someone put flowers on President Kennedy's grave with a note that read, "Mr. President, the Eagle has landed." During the last years of his life, Neil Armstrong was disappointed that America's space program was no longer exploring. If you love his story, you should think about becoming an astronaut. We need more space explorers. And remember what his family said when he died at age 82. Next time you walk outside on a clear night and see the moon smiling down at you, think of Neil Armstrong and give him a wink. Whatever your path is in life, explore your dreams. Use hard work and teamwork. Be brave and patient. Engineer your own solutions. It can take you all the way to the moon. I am Neil Armstrong. I know that every journey begins with one first step. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that story. This is a real picture of him from when he was going to go on the missions. And these are real photos of, this is him as a child, and this is Neil right here, and then Michael and Buzz as well. And that's the launch of their mission. And that is a picture, it's hard to see, but that is a real picture of Neil standing on the surface of the moon. So I hope you enjoyed this story with me. Neil Armstrong is very special to me since I went to Purdue, and he's very special to everyone at Purdue because it really just shows the hard work and determination that he had, and that's what we love to see at Purdue, right? Okay, well, I hope you are having a wonderful time, and I will see you next time. Bye.